Hello, Oscar here. Star of the show today is this Zelos Mako GMT. This 40mm version comes in a striking white mother of pearl dial sectioned off in a turbine pattern, which Zelos is calling a mosaic. When I first picked up this watch, I was immediately impressed with its bold design. There's really nothing else on the watch market quite like this watch, so it's understandable why they have a loyal fan base online from watch nerds, and why so many of their watches go out of stock the same day that they go up for sale. This Mako GMT is a limited edition. Only 300 were made. It's sold out on Zelos' webpage, as when they release a watch, they only produce a certain number. After that, it's gone for good. You're only able to obtain one if you buy one secondhand from a private reseller. Now, when Zelos does these limited runs, they reach out to content creators on YouTube to review these watches. In return, they also let watch reviewers keep the watch at no extra charge. I am not one of those folks. I purchased this secondhand with my own cash. I feel very strongly when doing product reviews, you should put your money where your mouth is. Otherwise, how can you 100% trust that the opinion you're hearing is fair and unbiased? I have some thoughts that I haven't heard from others on YouTube yet regarding Zelos as a brand. Are they worth the hype? Is Zelos a microbrand you should purchase from? I'm going to cover all of that after doing the standard review, but before jumping into the review of this watch, I will say that I really like Zelos. I'm a fan of their business model, and they are quickly becoming my favorite microbrand. The limited runs and the way they promote their watches on YouTube, that could be a bit controversial for some buyers, and that might even be a deal breaker for you. I'll cover all of that and more at the end of the video. First, let's do a quick overview of the watch. It's priced at $650 on the Zelos webpage, but don't let that price fool you. On launch day, it listed at $550, with an expected price bump up to $650 after the launch window ends. But since it sold out completely on the first day, it effectively only sold for $550 at retail on the Zelos web store. The case sits at 40mm, 12.2mm thick, but it feels quite chunky on the wrist at a total thickness of 14.7mm after you include the domed sapphire crystal. Lug to lug is 47mm across. The lume is exceptionally bright with Superluminova C3 and BGW9. It also has 300 meters of water resistance. Zelos always provides excellent specs for the money, and this watch is no exception. The lug width is 20mm across, with quick release on the bracelet for easy strap changes. The bracelet also has female end links, which gives it a slightly smaller presence on your wrist when looking at the watch head on. It also has a quick adjust clasp to ensure that you can adjust for a good fit on your wrist as it swells and contracts throughout the day. Once you wear a watch with this feature, it's hard to go back to living without one without a quick adjust clasp. This watch also features a ceramic 48-click bezel, which is a good touch, but it's not always guaranteed in these GMT watches. Some manufacturers, like Timex, will reuse the bezels from their dive watches that have 120 clicks. The bezel action on a 48-click bezel is nice and chunky, so to me it's an absolute must to have on any GMT watch. You are also covered for time zones that are offset by 30 minutes. The only places in the world that are offset by 30 minutes are India, Iran, Myanmar, and parts of Central Australia. If you find yourself in Nepal, a remote part of Western Australia, or on a tiny island off the coast of New Zealand, which is offset by 45 minutes, then you're going to be out of luck. The dial features an incredible mother of pearl that appears white in normal lighting conditions, but in bright light you will see shades of pink, blue, and green appear. This dial is very hard to capture its beauty in stock renders or in photos, and even video doesn't do it 100% justice. This is definitely the watch's strongest feature, and there's really nothing else like it on the watch market today. The dimensions seem friendly for small wrists at first, but the watch head alone weighs in at 86 grams, and with the steel bracelet added, I weighed this at a whopping 168 grams. Around 150 grams is my upper limit for weight on watches, and I definitely feel wrist fatigue when wearing the Zelos for just a few hours. For reference, I usually wear a Seiko Alpinist with a strap-code steel bracelet. That weighs in at 143 grams. On wrist, you'll definitely notice its height at 14.7 millimeters with that domed sapphire crystal. Once I wore this watch, I quickly realized that domed or boxed sapphire crystals are just not for me. I feel very conscious about potentially hitting the watch, and the crystal, because it's elevated, will take the brunt of the damage, and the domed surface makes it more susceptible to cracking. Also, I'm not a big fan of how this watch digs into the top of my wrist, and overall, it gives a very awkward side profile on my 7-inch wrist. The Zelos Mako GMT features a Miyota 9075 movement. This movement is a traveler's GMT, also sometimes called a true GMT. These GMT movements are more complex to manufacture because you get the added feature of changing the hour hand independently, and it also changes the date forward or backwards as you pass midnight with the independent hour hand. As you can see, changing the hour does not hack the movement. The second hand will keep on ticking. This is very handy for folks who cross to a different time zone while traveling, as it's simpler to adjust for the new time zone once you arrive at your destination. The downside is, you lose that functionality of quick setting the date. The other GMT movement under $1,000 that we typically see is the Seiko NH34. The NH34 is a collar GMT, sometimes called an office GMT. As for which is better, well, it depends on your needs. A collar GMT can be just as useful, if not more useful to you. Personally, once I set the GMT hand, I don't adjust it. So, in theory, a collar GMT would function just as well for me as the Traveler's GMT 99% of the time. If you have a bidirectional bezel with 24-hour markings, that's the only thing that I change on a watch when I want to quickly check the time in a different part of the world. Having an adjustable 24-hour bezel is arguably more important and more convenient, as you don't need to disengage the crown and put it in the second position and adjust for that additional time zone. I think that calling this style of GMT a true GMT is misleading, as it implies that collar GMTs are inferior or are not a real GMT complication. Also, to buyers, it doesn't clearly signal the difference between the two types of GMT movements. Ultimately, you should choose whichever GMT movement you think will be more useful to you, and ignore all of the riffraff between, oh, this is not a true GMT, or office GMTs are somehow inferior, because that's really just not the case. Zelos is a microbrand based in Singapore, and it was founded by entrepreneur Elshan Tang in 2014. Tang has been a watch lover since a young age, and the story goes that he got bored of buying and trading the same watch brands with similar designs. So he decided to start his own watch company and introduce his own change to the watch marketplace. The mission statement of Zelos is to make it more fun for enthusiasts to collect and trade watches by introducing bold and inspired designs that El Shantang oversees and designs himself. What do I like about the Zelos Mako? The dial is absolutely incredible, and it's what is going to draw most buyers in. It should also be said that Zelos pays excellent attention to the finer details. The bracelet is well constructed, the micro-adjust works fantastically. I'll also mention that the Mako case shape features some unique beveling on the sides that give it a nice flair. The caseback is quite plain, with an engraved shark taking the place of a see-through caseback. This is not a negative. I will take a regular case back over a see-through case if it's using an off-the-shelf plain movement inside. You'll also get some reduced thickness if you don't have an exhibition movement. As for what I don't like, it's still that thickness of the watch. Other GMT watches in this price range, like the Seiko 5 SSK line, are already quite thick at 13.6 millimeters. That GMT movement will need some extra thickness, so adding a domed sapphire crystal really pushes the thickness of this watch over the edge of what is acceptable for me. That, along with its heavy weight at 168 grams, it just creates for a wearing experience that becomes unpleasant after a couple of hours. Swapping out the bracelet for a strap helps a little bit, but it's a shame to not use the excellent bracelet that's included. It can be hard to know for sure if you will enjoy wearing a watch before living with it for a few weeks. It can seem like a perfect fit when just looking at a spec sheet on a store's webpage. At 40mm case size, 12mm thick without the crystal, I thought that this would be a home run for me. Unfortunately, this is one that is likely going to a new owner sometime soon on the watch exchange forums. That brings us to Zelos's business model. Why do they do limited production runs? Only 300 were made of this Mako GMT. Why? Well, you can argue that it's anti-consumer to do limited runs, and it makes buying a Zelos watch a bigger pain than it needs to be. But when you remember that the founder, Elshan Tang, is someone that enjoys trading watches with other watch nerds, then this business model starts to make sense. If I'm a watch buyer for a micro brand, my number one concern is, what if I don't like it and I want to resell it? When Zelos does limited runs, that keeps the resale value from crashing down like other micro brands, and it also makes it easier to find willing buyers. It's also more exciting because you can go for months on end searching for a specific model until you find the right one for sale. So, for watch nerds that enjoy trading watches with others on the marketplace, the limited run of each watch is actually a positive, not a negative. Marketing each watch with YouTube content creators by essentially gifting it to them after review is questionable. However, microbrands have a bigger burden to bear with marketing compared to larger, more established watch brands. That, and watch reviewers will typically resell the watch instead of keeping it after the review, which helps to keep revenue coming in for them and to pay for the work that they put into making reviews. So, all in all, gifting a watch to reviewers is not that different compared to the standard sponsored content that reviewers will do and needing to return the watch to the manufacturer after the review. Alright, let's wrap up. This Mako GMT is not for me. I love several things about it, but there are deal breakers about this watch that I wish I knew before buying. That's just how it goes with these smaller micro brands. Sometimes there's not enough info and user reviews out there for you to gather before you hit the purchase button. Thankfully, I think Zelos is such a strong microbrand that it makes it safe to try and buy. One of the common traps that you see with watch nerds is that they buy too many budget or mid-range watches, and then they are left with a huge collection that they have trouble reselling, or they have to take a huge financial hit when they do sell. Zelos keeps it fun, and they really are the value king for watches under $1,000, and the resale value is preserved and it's relatively easy to find another buyer in the marketplace. Just make sure you know what you're getting into before you hit purchase. This is Oscar. If you enjoyed watching, leave me a quick comment and a like. It helps the channel grow. Thanks for the watches. See you next time.